very much.
Am I done now?
Yes, sir. PABA Secretary Peggy Norris, do you have a thought of the day?
Even if you are on the right track, you will get run over if you just sit there, said by nobody else but Will Rogers.
Well, I'd like to postpone the reading of the minutes from last Tuesday's meeting. We'll handle it next Tuesday. Secretary, can I get a motion to do that?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Do we have actually a number of members with guests? Do we have any members who would like to introduce their guests today? Yes.
Matt Rainwater.
Yes, ma'am. Right?
Hi.
Matt? Tell them who you are.
I am nobody.
He isn't nobody. He's a voter, taking notes. And he was the president and still is the president of the Port Angeles Theater Project, involved in the Lincoln Theater before it went commercial. But I was on the board of that as well. Still am on the board with him. So is Debbie Spinks here. If I could introduce her real quick. Debbie?
You're putting me on the spot too.
Okay. Who are you, Debbie?
Didn't I do this last week?
I wasn't here, so I didn't.
Like just joined this location because I owned small business in the past and I would love to see Port Angeles thrive. So I look forward to working with everybody.
Good. All right. All right. We have a man over there. We've passed out some information. We'll get to the letters too in a minute, but we have a nifty flyer here. And who produced it? Trev.
I did.
Stand up and tell us about it.
My name is Trev Naranchi. I'm with Vertical Marketing.
Can everybody hear you?
Sorry.
Okay. Trev, come up here.
Oh, really? Jeez. I must apologize for my attire. Young snagging. I was supposed to be on the road this morning. I'm not supposed to be here. So,
Port Angeles Forms.
Port Angeles, we have the marketing contract for the city of Port Angeles this year, so I'm in town distributing brochures, booklets, stickers, shirts, going through advertisements, our marketing playbook. So just making a quick tour of PA. I'm on my way over to eventually Olympia today. So if you want some brochures, I'm happy to hand them out. That's it, really.
Okay, tell us the company again. This is a company in Bend, Oregon, the city of Port Angeles.
Hold it up.
Bend, Oregon, and coming soon, Port Angeles, Washington. So we're going to have an office here as well. So we are no longer going to be a non-local company. We are going to be your local company.
Good.
We'll hand out some booklets for you, but yeah, we're distributing it everywhere. What else would you like to know?
Anybody have any questions?
Quick question, is your marketing playbook available for businesses to see?
Absolutely. Yes, if you will. My email address is trev@vertigomarketing.com. If you'll email me, I can send you a PDF file of that. So yeah, it's all public information.
Yeah, just go to zip over to see him.
Yeah.
Are we here for the meeting?
I'm here with
Senator
Hargrove.
Hargrove.
I'm looking at your brochure here.
Yes?
It says 8 gargantuan trees. You have some second growth next to that person. I think you want to actually find some gargantuan trees.
Good point, there you are.
Work on that for next year.
Mark?
And just, Trev dropped the boxes of those brochures off at the visitor center, so if you really want some,
Yeah.
we have a large storage of those items down there.
We have some t-shirts. We do a weekly giveaway. Edna's got some. I've got stickers, booklets, t-shirts.
Okay, the Chamber of Commerce.
Sherry's going to have to get a shirt. I want to see Sherry and visit Port Angeles shirt. So make sure she stops by.
Okay, I got a shirt for you, Terry.
All right.
All right, any other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
Trev.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we have some other guests. Rich Erickson's here, of course, from KOP. Jim McIntyre. We haven't seen him for a while. Jim. Laura O'Neill. You were over there, now you're over there. Do we know, tell us who you are, Laura.
I'm Laura O'Neill. I'm going to speak loud so I don't have to go up there.
I am a local business owner, but I don't do a lot of business locally, if that makes any sense. A lot of my customers are on the east side of the country, sorry. So anyway, I'm going to be joining, so I'm excited to be a part of this community right here in
Great.
Port Angeles.
Thank you very much. And Amy, we have an Amy Miller? Am I looking at this right?
Back here.
Ah, okay. Please, stand up. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Amy Miller. I'm here for Jeff today.
Okay, thank you. All right. Patrick Downey, Mayor of Port Angeles, is here today. Thank you for coming. And Judith Morris is here. Judith? Mr. Kilburn's rep here in town. Okay, who else are we missing? We got a lot of guests today. We have to do the math. Please stand up. Right, absolutely. Thank you. And I met a man here today who bought a house next to mine. And he just moved here from Tucson, Arizona. Please stand up and introduce yourself.
Hello everybody, my name is James Granger, and I'm from Tucson, Arizona, and I support local businesses. I'm very proud to be here and to be part of the community.
Real delighted to move here from Tucson. Electronics before he came up here. Anyway, we're delighted to have you.
We'll be happy to moisturize.
Do we have any guests? Oh, I'm sorry, Steve. Steve Carringer, famous rep. Anyway, did I miss anybody else? Any other guests today? All right. I've distributed some letters, 3 letters. They've been approved by your board of directors, and they now need to be reviewed by the membership before I can sign and send them. You look them over, and in the interest of time today, we're going to have further discussion, excuse me, and action on these letters at next Tuesday's meeting. So, take a look, and if you have any changes or any suggestions or any questions about them, let me know. Otherwise, we'll talk about it next Tuesday.
Are they online?
Pardon?
Are
Yes.
they online?
They can be.
Yeah.
We haven't put them online. They're just drafts. But let me know. You have the copies of them?
No, that's
Okay. Let me give you some. Go ahead. If anybody else needs any copies, put some on the tables and such, because I have other copies, so just let me know. Do we have any other members with short announcements or anything else for the good of the order? Phil?
I spoke with Commissioner Peach yesterday. He had knee replacement surgery last Monday. He's up and mobile a little bit.
And he had knee surgery, right? He got
And
knee
knee replacement.
Knee replacement.
And so he's back in action. He's attending some meetings this week. He's meeting with George for the United Justice Service Center. He's over the words of it, and he's looking forward to a speedy recovery.
Good. George?
Thursday night is the annual meeting of the Council of Clallam Coalition, which Bill will be the featured speaker.
Who's the featured speaker, George?
Bill Peach. We usually get 50 plus of the wonderful volunteers who maintain the trail. Many of you saw in the newspaper over the last month that volunteers actually concrete decked the Dungeness River Bridge. All volunteers, it's pretty amazing. So anyone who's interested is invited. Is at the Dungeness River Audubon Center. 6:30, please.
6:30 on Thursday?
Thursday.
On Thursday. Okay, Peninsula Trail. Mark?
Tomorrow morning at the Red Lion is the first chamber morning meeting. We're going to have the city and Studio Cascade presenting findings and feedback from the comprehensive planning process they've been doing for the last couple of months. So it's the first time for them to sort of start giving back rather than taking in all the inputs from all of you and all the rest of the community. So that's tomorrow morning at 7:30 at the Red Lion. We'll have coffee and donuts.
That's great. Again, chamber breakfast 7:30 tomorrow. Okay, any other announcements? Let me,
Thursday night's membership meeting, the Downtown Association at the upstairs landing hall.
okay. Young, you want to add to that? She's on the front page today at the media. What about PABA? Anything else? No, I guess not. Okay, let me turn the program over.
Look who's walked in.
Tribal chairwoman. Come on in. We'll find a seat for you somewhere.
Do right there.
Why don't you sit right here?
There you go, guys.
Sissy, how are you? City Councilwoman. Hello. How you doing? All right. Let me turn the program over, if I could, to Phil Kitchell, our Vice President. And Phil?
Real fast.
Oh, Senator, I can't tell you how long I've waited for this.
Oh, no.
The abuse I've had to put up with that man for 30-plus years has been legendary. My first opportunity to meet Senator Hargrove was when he was a representative. I was a newly elected school board member who went roaring over to Olympia for our legislative assembly and went in to meet Senator Hargrove to discuss school funding and timber harvest on DNR lands, 1986. That conversation has continued through today, and at the rate we're going, we're probably going to be another 30 years before that conversation is over with. During the course of the next several years, I had occasion to go back to Olympia and meet him on a variety of topics, mostly related to the DNR, but also in terms of school funding. I was present in the room when then Senator Hargrove had the opportunity to tell Commissioner of Public Lands Jennifer Belcher how much he loved stumps. That was a memorable moment on TVW that I go back and we used to replay it every once in a while. I was depressed. I think get a chance to look at that and watch that exchange. I will say that my experience over the last 30-plus years, in terms of my association with Senator Hargrove, to my knowledge, there has not been a more ferocious and effective senator or representative on behalf of the 24th District that I am aware of. He has done a tremendous job for this district. At the time when I was a county commissioner, we had Representatives Kessler, Buck, and Senator Hargrove in there. There was not a legislative district in Olympia that had better representation, more effective representation, and more effective leadership than the 24th District. In my view, it has been an honor and a privilege to have known Senator Hargrove in terms of his activities in Olympia on our behalf. We will sorely miss him in the future, unless, of course, he decides to run for Commissioner of Public Lands, which would be nice. That would be hope. I think that would. I would just say that I hope his political career is not over. The man has done a wonderful job on behalf of this district. I would hope you would join me in welcoming what I think is the most effective legislative representative we've had.
Before you go, we have a gift, I think, for
I think we're going to do it now, or
Yeah,
we're going to
we'll
do it now? Okay. Senator Hargrove, would you come on?
Come on up. We decided as a board.
That was it.
No, that you need another plaque. So, this is yours. And it fell apart during that. And the first time I met this gentleman was at Lake Limerick in Shelton for his first fundraising golf tournament. How many years ago, Jim?
Oh, I don't know.
12?
There's a practical, yeah.
One of the things that this gentleman does when he wants to release stress is ride his Harley. Is that not true?
Yes, it is.
The big Harley.
We have no Harley distributors in Port Angeles. I know more about motorcycles now than I ever wanted to. These are glasses put over your glasses when you ride your Harley. They have 3 sets of lenses for dusk,
goodness.
for sunset, and for bright sun.
Am I gonna need a degree to work on this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, look, they have phone to get the perspiration off your ride.
You know what? This might be handy if people are throwing things at me. Yeah.
Come on, be a true Harley.
Put on the glasses.
Easy rider.
Yeah, exactly. It reminds me of from Into the P. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was Edna's problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's all right. So, yeah, a few years ago, I passed a piece of legislation that prohibited profiling of motorcycle riders. We had a whole bunch of motorcycle riders show up for the bill signing, and I remember the headline on the top of the PDN. It said, "Cop killer shows up at Hargrove bill sign." I don't think there's ever been a bigger typeset.
Who could have done that?
It turns out the guy had been exonerated from that action, and it was actually fine. But anyway, actually I got a lot of compliments on that article, as a matter of fact, because I was more popular than your paper at the time. So I figure I'm on my Kobe tour, right? So we'll see how many three-pointers I missed today. So I really appreciate you guys inviting me up here. This has been a great group to come to over the years. Probably second only to the phone tree. Do they still have a?
Yes.
They do.
I'll have to go see them again too, but that's always been fun too. Anyway, so 32 years, but 32 years in the legislature. Legislative years are really like dog years, okay? So 28 years, I figure I had 7 times 28. But then when you're doing the budget, it's like double dog years. So that was like 56 more. So I've been in the legislature 252 years by my count. So even though I'm only 62 years old, you can see the miles that are on my brain and body. I'm also by nature a sprinter. I'm not a long distance person. So I've basically been sprinting for 32 years, doing work for the citizens of this district and the state. And not to boast or brag, it's just been a lot of work. So 4 years as the budget lead for the Democrats in the Senate in a divided government. And so I had a lot of time down there working on budgets. It worked out to be about 12 hours a day for 6 months straight. You wouldn't think it would take that long to figure stuff out. Well, people have hugely different opinions of the world, and dealing with the Senate Republicans and the House Democrats is kind of like the Arabs and the Israelis, Not only do they not get along, but they live in completely different worlds. Their mindsets in completely different worlds. And so trying to, bridge that gap takes a lot of work. So, by definition, all of our budgets the last 4 years have been bipartisan budgets because you've got a Republican majority in the Senate and the Democrats in the House. And I think the product has been pretty good. It's been very painful to get to, taken us longer than it should. But, how many of you can agree around the dinner table with your family about things? So you can imagine when you get 147 legislators in the government trying to figure out something, it takes a while. So the last budget we did was a supplemental budget. The big thing in that supplemental budget was about $170-some million for the forest fires that happened last year, which were a record year, which came after the previous year, which was also a record year, but it was 3 times the previous year, which was a record year. It was a huge amount of forest fires. I think we have a little better snowpack this year, but now our spring is getting awfully dry, so I'm getting nervous again about forest fires this year. We also, I'm probably going to just ramble a little bit, so just don't mind. Good. So we put about $34 million into mental health, particularly around Western State Hospital, where if we didn't deal with that, we were going to lose our CMS licensing there, and then that put at risk about $65 to $70 million in federal money. So that was something we had to do. It's a kind of a big investment for a supplemental budget. And then there were some other things that we worked on. Homelessness has become quite a crisis in our state, not just in Seattle. Aberdeen has got a huge issue with homelessness. I don't know what it's like up here, but we've really seen an uptick in that, and so we made some investments there. So I thought I'd spend most of my time kind of trying to give you an idea of what the budget is like, and oh, hi, Jenny. I do forestry work with her, so what the budget is like and what it's going to be like coming up in the next couple of years, because it's going to be a difficult deal. So I brought this little diagram, and I brought a bunch so that I could pass it out, but I'm not going to give them out now because you'll be looking at the diagram the whole time instead of listening to me. So you can just take a look here. This big green ball is how much we spend on school funding. The brown here is human services, which would be like our children's department, and mental health and ED and other things like that. This is how much the state spends on health care here. Higher education is this little purple ball down here. And like I said, I have a bunch of these. You can get more, people can look at them in more detail. There's a lot of information on this. Our debt payments, which is basically what we have to pay out of the operating budget to fund the capital budget that Steve Theringer writes. And then public safety is this blue one here. This is our corrections division. So you see that's moderate size. And then they get smaller from there. Other government operations, other education, natural resources is this one down here. And this little tiny thing that doesn't even deserve to be a planet is what we spend on the legislature down there. So, you know, as far as all of our staff and all of our exterior committees and things like that, is that down there. So, I wanted you to get a perspective of states. This is state dollars, okay? There's obviously federal dollars, there's other resources that come in. But as far as your state tax dollars, this is where it goes. Now, there's this big green thing here that I didn't explain. This is the cost of 1351 and McCleary that's left to do. It's about $7.4 billion, okay? So I've kind of been referring to it as the Death Star. Because, you know, you will hear some people say, oh, we don't need to raise taxes at all we need to do is prioritize. Well, if you take the size of that and look at the size of all of these other planets in our state government spending, which one are you going to wipe out? In fact, maybe which 2 or 3 are you going to wipe out if you're going to do that? Now, you know, if you get rid of all prisons, probably not a good idea. We could have no state support for higher education. The 2 of those are getting close. You know, I mean, so you can see that just the scale of it. I'm just trying to give you the scale of the idea here. So, 1351 was a citizen-passed initiative that has been delayed by 4 years, but in this next budget cycle comes back into the 4-year calculation, so the legislators will have to deal with that
8485.
this next year. And the rest of it, our McCleary payments we've been making good progress these last 2 bienniums. There's about $400 million left of what is like MSOC, K3 class size, all-day K, transportation. There's a little bit left of that. The biggest piece of this is that the Supreme Court said you cannot use local levies for basic education. And about half of our local levies goes into basic education because it goes into teacher salaries. So in order for us to finish the job, actually not us, them to finish the job. Yeah, for them to finish the job, they're going to have to figure out how to get about $2.2 billion a biennium out of levies and funded by the state. Now, there's numbers of ways to do that. We looked at, you can look at different types of taxes, whether it be capital gains or something else like that. There's also the possibility of raising the state tax levy and limiting local levies. So in a sense, it's kind of a swap there because those resources are in the local levies. That affects all these districts around the state completely differently. And that's what makes that such a very difficult situation. So just to give you a little bit of, I'm getting off way away from my notes, but I guess that doesn't matter. Give you a little bit of an explanation here. The per thousand levy in Aberdeen and Hoquiam is almost $5 a thousand for their local school levy. About half of that's going to basic ed. They're very property poor school districts down there. In Seattle, it's about $1.35 a thousand, and yet they raise way more money. Way more money per student, way more money because they have all that property, they have those skyscrapers, they have all that stuff down there. So I hope part of the solution will be equalizing these investments in communities so that every kid in the state is getting the same amount of money for their education, and every taxpayer on their property tax is paying roughly the same, but there's such huge disparities that people in property-rich districts that are paying very low property taxes, they're not excited about raising them. Even our friends in Seattle, I found, who tend to love taxes, they're not excited about that. And then there are people that are in areas where we have much higher local levies that maybe are in Eastern Washington, etc., and they just don't like taxes at all. So their legislators are in a bind over there. So anyway, so you can see there's this kind of crash coming. I mean, this kind of a collision of planets, if you will, coming. And so I guess the point is that there's different solutions here. You could take and repeal 1351, for instance, completely. That's something the citizens voted on. I don't see the votes in Olympia to do that, but that's a potential. You could do some of this property tax shift would be part of it. You're probably still going to need some additional revenue in any case. And then, I guess I'm skipping to the end here, and I'll probably say this again, but then on top of 1351, the very next year, 1366 passed, which potentially lowers our sales tax by a penny. So the public in general, and I can be very candid now since you don't have to vote for me, is schizophrenic, vote for more spending and less taxes at the same time. And so that's what's handed the legislature, is to take and figure this out, okay? And figure it out by prioritizing. Okay, like I said, which planet are you going to consume with that Death Star? You get rid of higher ed, you get rid of corrections. The math just isn't there. Most people say, well, take it from all other stuff. Well, all other stuff are these little tiny ones down here. These little tiny, the math just doesn't add up. So that's one thing I'd like to just, try to get across to people. There are solutions. The solutions are difficult. And then the other thing that I wanted to say is, because I went back to my notes, is that this education plan, it isn't the only increase on the horizon that we're either being mandated to deal with, or that should be, not we, they you got me off of the wrong track here. We have increasing pension liability in the state, and we have some underfunded pension systems, and that's up to maybe $600 million needs to come into play. We have a children's mental health lawsuit that's another $40 million. We have rulings from both federal law and courts that say we have to pay all our independent providers overtime. Those are people that take care of disabled or elderly people, and many of them have been working so many hours a month, but then they volunteer some hours. Well, the courts say, no, you've got to pay them for every last hour, and so that's about $40 million. And then, and that's before 147 newly elected legislators get down there with their new ideas that they want to do, I mean, we've got this huge budget mess, but everybody goes to Olympia to do something. They don't go there to just sit on their hands and listen to Steve and leadership tell them how they're going to vote on the budget.
Well, I wish they would.
Hasn't worked my experience. So you will have a bunch of people working on it, and you don't do anything in Olympia without it costing some money. I mean, just almost everything you do that actually is going to do something costs money. And whether or not you fund it or not is another thing. I mean, sometimes you pass bills that create costs for people without funding it, local government, schools, etc. But the responsible thing to do, of course, is to take and fund it if we're going to ask somebody to do something. So I'm going to skip away from that concept for a minute. I'm sure I'll take questions on all of this later. And like I said, I don't know if I brought enough, but we can get more, and you can reprint them. There's no copyright on these if you want them. So last session, in addition to working on the supplemental budget, we also did what I think was a pretty major rewrite of our backup legislation. First of all, that was what I think is one of the most important laws that I was able to work on in my career was the backup legislation. It not only helped deal with runaways and helping good parents by the courts supporting them instead of seeing them as the problem if they weren't abusing their kids, but it also created provisions around truancy that helped us keep our kids in school, and maybe more than, or maybe in addition to keeping our kids in school. Harry, there's no room for you in here. So. Okay. We exceeded the fire limit. It's also, when a kid starts missing school, it's a signal something else is going on in their life. Whether they're getting into drugs, getting into bad company, something's happening when they start to miss a lot of school. And so Becca was set up to have the courts, the kid would have to go to court under a truancy petition, they'd be required to go back to school, but the judge could also evaluate the situation. It's like, are there drugs here? Is there mental health issues? Do they have family conflicts that need to be dealt with? And so that system has been in place for over 20 years, and fortunately, we don't have term limits in this state, and so I've been able to follow that for that whole period of time. And we have some remarkable data that's accumulated over that period of time. Back in 1995, we had over 1,500 juveniles in juvenile prisons in the state. And the last count, I believe right now, there's 460. So we have been able to, and we haven't decriminalized anything. We haven't changed anything to say, oh, you're not a criminal anymore. We just, this prevention, getting to these kids early, is keeping these kids from heading into our deep end. Also, another statistic, this might be 2 or 3 years old now, but 73% of our adults in our adult correction system were in our juvenile system. So it's literally a feeder, you know. So the fact that we are now reducing that juvenile crime has also is affecting our adult crime. We have one of the lowest violent crime rates in the nation, and as a result of that, we're saving about $1 billion a year in our correction system because of that. We do have issues with our property crime in this state, and the last several years I was working on a Justice Reinvestment Initiative, and we were trying to get a handle on that. That has not yet come to pass. Somebody else is going to have to work on that. But I guess another thing that has been kind of a main focus of my career is trying to prevent crime instead of just punishing crime. And the reason for that is not only does it save taxpayers money, because you don't have to cycle people through these correction systems over and over again, pay for their prison, etc., and then have them recidivate when they come out, but it saves victims, because the way you enter the system through that way. And so if we spend a little money in some, whether it be mental health or some other program, drug treatment or something, to try to, or BECA, to try to keep people, kids and then adults out of committing crime, we not only save all that money, but we save victims along the way. And I think we've done a fairly good job with that. I think there's another big step to go, and that's on the property crime one. So I'm not sure who's going to take that up, but there you go, Steve. So another thing that I'm pretty proud of was the mental health legislation we passed a number of years ago that looked at co-occurring disorders between drug and alcohol and mental health, and also created the 1/10 of a cent local money so that the locals can decide how to add wraparound services, and the mental health. I think that's been referred to in the PDN as the Hargrove tax maybe 150 times, something like that, yeah. Anyway, so that didn't seem to hurt me either, by the way. But, anyway, they kept me honest, let's put it that way. So anyway, so you know, I'm fortunate enough to have been around long enough to see some of the data come in on some of these things. And though we still have lots of issues, both with crime and mental health issues, etc., we've started to turn the curves. And like I said, I'm particularly proud of the BECA stuff. So other issues that I've worked on over my career, obviously, Phil mentioned, spent a lot of time working on timber issues, not just DNR and school trust issues, but lived through the whole spotted owl situation, went to plenty of 5,000 log truck rallies, etc. And you know, we've tried really hard to take and maintain a viable timber industry on the Olympia Peninsula, which I believe is still our biggest piece of our economy. But you know, in the last few years, I've seen some information come out as we start to become more and more concerned about climate change. That actually forest management is part of the solution to climate change. That you sink more carbon by growing wood very fast for 40 years, 50 years, harvesting it, putting it into wood products, this CLT, like Representative Theringer has been working on, getting more wood into building construction instead of steel and concrete, which are very energy intensive, and a lot of that energy is still coming from fossil fuels. And by sinking carbon in that wood and then growing, you know, when you build a building out of steel, you don't plant little steel trees out there that, you know, pull carbon out of the air, you know. But when you build a building out of wood, you put little seedlings out there that suck that carbon out of the air. And I think that the science behind that it's accurate and it's real persuasive. And I think that there's a real healthy future for forest management on the Olympic Peninsula as we start to convince our urban neighbors in Puget Sound that it's much better to build with wood than with steel and concrete. And in fact, doesn't CLT propose to build maybe 35-story buildings out of wood? And so we can see we can replace a lot of construction out of something that's environmentally good instead of not so much. So that's something that I will probably continue to be a prophet about, is talking about those issues. Being a forester, I'm also pretty interested and connected in that still. So another few things I wanted to mention is maybe just a little bit of perspective here that I can, what do I have, like another hour? So I guess I wanted to tell you a little bit about legislators. And this would be virtually all legislators. In my 32 years there, virtually all legislators are interested in making things better and in doing things for their constituents and or the state, being responsible to try to improve the lives of their citizens. I have run into very few self-serving climbers. There's been a few, but very few. Now, people have, just like all of you in this room, have widely different opinions of what is better, okay, and how you're going to get to better. But don't question their motives. Their motives are they really want things to be better, and they really are working hard to do that. Sometimes I think they're stupid, but you know, I mean, the point is, you know, it's my opinion versus their opinion, you know. But anyway, so I want you to know that. I mean, there is a lot of responsibility in people that don't get paid very much money. Okay, so I found out recently we're having a hard time attracting psychiatrists to work at Western State Hospital, and they get paid about $230,000 a year, something like that, and we're not paying them enough because the VA is paying $270, and they're stealing all our psychiatrists, at least all the ones worth having. So legislators make around 43, 44, something like that, and they're responsible for trying to fix this mess, you know, with a schizophrenic public that says lower taxes and raise spending at the same time, with the courts that say every time you come up with a solution and we're going to actually cut something in the budget, the courts many times come along behind and say, oh, you can't cut that now because you said you were going to pay for it. So it's a very difficult job. They get paid very little, and of course, they're responsible for everything that goes wrong. Actually, I have been responsible for everything that goes wrong. Being there 32 years, I don't know how I went around on this McCleary tour last fall, and people said, we've had this education problem for 30 years. And I go, I guess it's my fault, you know. I've been there for 30 years. So I just want you to know that they're trying hard to make things better. They may have different opinions on what is better. But I sincerely believe that, and I see a lot of people working very hard to do that. Another thing that's changed in my career has been the media and the access to information. You know, I mean, I've been kidding the PDN, but basically the newspaper, you probably get more information out of a newspaper than you get out of virtually any other source of at least more digestible information. We have so much Twitter and tweets and I don't know, I don't even want to say what the speaker said, but anyway. He said he knows how to twerk. I don't think he knew what he was talking about. Anyway, yeah. So, but you know, and television, which most people watch, is like a 20 or 30 second spot. They try to grab these big, complicated issues, you know, and get it into a 20 or 30 second spot. And we actually had a television reporter come to one of our retreats here, I don't know, probably a decade ago, and he said they hired a consultant to go to one of the TV news stations and say, how do we make more money? And the consultant came in and told the TV executives, they said, you do that by pumping waste and government stories. Because waste and government stories promote this feeling that somehow there's this big pot of money there that you don't have to raise taxes or make real cuts. If you could just get rid of the waste, you could have your cake and eat it too. It isn't true, folks. There is some waste, but there isn't $7.4 billion in waste, okay? And there's some things we can do better, like the things we've done in corrections that are saving us a bunch of money, and prevention and stuff like that. But there isn't $7.4 billion. But yet, if you want to sell TV advertising, you need big watchership. If you want big watchership, you need to tickle the people's ears, you know, and you tickle their ears towards what natural human nature is. We want to have our cake and eat it too, right? So anyway, so as much as, you know, I've had my issues with the PDN over time, I still think you get better stories out of the newspaper in general because the reporters tend to do a little bit more work to find some accurate information. In fact, I really appreciated Jim Casey. I'm sorry he's gone. He was really, really a good reporter, and we had some great talks and really got into some issues. Not that their ones now aren't good too. I'm just saying that I would appreciate him. So, but there's so much information out there that the public gets just deluged with stuff on the internet. And of course, we know if it's on the internet, it must be true, right? You know. And I mean, people say they know that it isn't true, but yet, how do they form their opinions? Well, it's something that they saw on an email chain or something they saw on the internet. And then they know in reality it probably isn't all true, but you know, but they suck that in. So then what happens is it gets to be too much and they've got their daily lives, so then they turn on talk radio. And that's like the worst, okay? Absolutely the worst, because talk radio, it's all about getting people excited, angry, and calling in so that you have a constant flow of stuff to do. So if you're listening to that, that's fine. Just realize it's totally entertainment. There's not a shred of truth in any of it. Okay? So I can say whatever I feel like now. So I've already covered most of this stuff. Anyway, so I guess, yeah, I've already covered this. I've talked about how difficult the situation is. Like I said, we can get you more of these if people take these and they run out. So I've basically spent, before I stop to ask for questions, I've spent my life trying to love God and love my neighbor as myself, which I've tried to demonstrate in my service as a legislator, as I've worked to try to do things for my constituents of the people of the state. And I'm still going to be doing that, even though I just won't be doing it for the Senate. So, thanks.
First question, sir.
You sure I can't talk you into running for land commission? Jim, in terms of your background, which has been extensive as a forester and stuff, you were, I gotta tell you, depressingly accurate as to what the ECP was gonna do to trust beneficiaries. And I'm sorry to say you were right. But in your view, where do you think the DNR is going to be 2 years from now, and what do you think the impact will be on the revenue stream to the trust beneficiaries? You know, the background of this is the Merle that.
Well, yeah, I think that more than that is the landslide rules that have the golf course practices. I think you're seeing that on private lands too. There's unstable slopes are going to be affecting the harvest levels more. And it's hard to predict exactly, you know, and I don't know whether it would be really useful. I think part of the issue is to help change the public perception of forestry and of forest management, that we're going to do things in an environmentally safe way, an environmentally sound way, but also the more of it we do, the more we're helping climate change, because the more we're sinking carbon, the more we're using wood products, and that renewable resource is going to help the whole global environment too. I think we need to get off of our little I mean, I know you're concerned about your little area and how it's producing right now, but we need to change the whole debate so that people see that that's the solution, is using wood and using it responsibly instead of using concrete and fossil fuels and, you know, all of that stuff. Even natural gas is a fossil fuel, even though it's cleaner. It's still coming out of the ground. It's still emitting carbon, you know. So that, anyway, I don't think it'd be useful for me to try to predict exactly that.
I just would like everyone to know that you have been such a good friend to the city of Port Angeles and to Clallam County, that when we went to you with serious issues, you listened, you got it, and you went to work for us. You went to bat for us. Also this year, Steve Starenshire has just been amazing in helping us. We had some real problems with our county landfill. The decades-old planning didn't work for us currently, and we were in real jeopardy there. And you listened and you went to bat for us, and you told us you were going to help us, and you did. And this year, Steve also, he just said, I understand, I got it, and I'll take care of it, and you really have. So all the people in Clallam County that all uses puts out our garbage, we owe you a big thank you, both you and Steve. And I appreciate the fact that every time I've gone to Olympia, you were crazy busy, and you know we had 15 minutes to present our case, but you listened, you took care of us, and I really thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. I'd just like to say that it is so much easier for legislators to help their constituents get something done when they bring something to the table. And what was the most persuasive about the Port Angeles situation was that you had maxed your tipping fees out. You had done everything you could do locally. You just couldn't get it done. You don't know how many people come to us and go, we've got a great idea for you to do and you to fund and you to take care of, you know. And when local resources come forward, that means we know you have, you know, some skin in the game, you know, then it really becomes, so just for the future, you know, as you're looking at getting things done, if you bring some skin in the game, Steve, correct, then that really leverages getting things done as opposed to just a handout all the time. So thank you, and the city, I think, has been responsible, and we've tried to, you know, make that work. So, yes, sir.
I'd like your thoughts on something that has to do with education and funding, and that is the role of the Federal Department of Education. Do you think the rules that are coming down from the feds, like Common Core and others, are overall beneficial, or do they cause problems? And also the funding that the Federal Department of Education gets, for a state like Washington, it's about $2 billion on an allocated level if you take their funding and spread it around the country. Is it well spent up there the way they're spending it, or would it be better in the future world block granted to the state and used at the state level to fund state priorities?
So, first of all, I've never been on the education committee in my 32 years, so as far as some of the details of how all of that stuff works out, I'm probably not the best person to ask. As far as federal funding, get Derek Kilmer to stand here and answer those questions for you on that. But my general opinion is that the requirements that have come down from the federal level the requirements exceed the funding that comes with it. In other words, they don't give us enough to do what they're asking us to do. They have a lot of requirements and a little bit of funding, and that has presented problems. We've had to fund at the state level. It doesn't change the scale of this, though. Okay, you know, if we have, you said $2 billion of federal money across 50 states, you see that as a very...
Well, per state, they spend about $100 billion. So if you look at it on a per capita basis, on Washington, if you took all their money and block around it, Washington would get roughly $2 billion a year.
Yeah.
My question is just, is that, I'm sure they're doing some things we have to do at the state level, and is that money well and efficiently spent, or does it come with lots of strings or lots of requirements that actually, as you said, cost more to fund it, make the problem bigger?
There are requirements with it, yeah. Most of what we spend our education money on is salaries. That's just most of the teachers and salaries. And there is huge disparities in that too. I think as of this last contract, the Everett School District, the average teacher's making around $100,000 a year. I know that isn't what they're making in Port Angeles. You know, I mean, that just, and that's as a result of property-rich areas, property-poor areas, and so Everett comes down to Olympia and says, look at these great results we're getting. You know, we're paying our teachers more. Well, they're basically creaming the teachers from the entire state to go into their district, is what's happening, because they can pay so much more there. So we've also got a huge teacher shortage. Even if we had all this money to do 1351, I'm not so sure there's enough teachers out there. There's, you know, all of these things are rolling up on top of each other. So education is a complicated area, and I was dealing primarily just with the budgetary piece of it here, and have never spent that much time down deep into the policy. I both human services, correct, you just can't be an expert in everything. Yes, sir.
A follow-up question, guys. I'm a former Californian, and both judicial and legislative initiatives to equalize student funding the results are at best mixed, and by many metrics are not doing anything but positive. What metrics do you see as really critical to measure the value of these initiatives that go at the heart of a clearing?
Well, we do track school performance and student performance, and actually I'm supportive of, or have been supportive, it doesn't matter now, have been supportive of the testing that tells us how kids are doing, how schools are doing. Never been supportive of having this high stakes test where we take it out on the kid if the system failed them. But we are tracking that. And there was just another thought I had here. I think I'm losing it here a little bit too. So, okay, California even schools. I can't think what the other one was. There was another metric I was thinking about. Graduation rates. First, you got to keep kids in school. It's funny how that registers. Kids in school, they're not going to graduate.
I was just going to add, Jim, that many school districts, particularly large urban ones, are graduating only 50%. It's incredible.
Yeah, and
after children's.
And we all. I had it and I lost it. Oh well, I'll think of it a second. Okay, yes.
Harry needs to tell the story of how you first met.
I applied for a job at Rainier and he wouldn't hire me.
So how would the world be different if I hired you?
I probably wouldn't have been a senator because you would have worked me 60 to 80 hours a week on salary.
So it all turned out good.
Yeah. Yes, you were a psychic. You still are.
So Jim, we here at PABA are trying to get ourselves up to speed on what's going on regarding carbon tax, fuel tax, carbon cap stuff. Can you kind of give us some context of where things are right now, and maybe even briefly talk about your bill?
Okay, well, I believe there's an initiative on the ballot. It was an issue of the legislature. We can do anything that's on the ballot. I don't think anybody's particularly excited about that one. I'm hoping everybody just votes no, and it will be coming back. There will be, I think, in the state, some successful move to price carbon at some point, whether it be a carbon tax or a cap and trade program, etc. Just because of the makeup of our citizenry, okay, and concern about the environment, concern about climate change, etc. So this kind of ties in with what I was mentioning before. Forestry can either be part of the solution and get in there and be part of working towards having it be recognized and accounted for in that system, or they can stand back with the oil companies and with the dirty coal energy, etc., and just try to resist it and eventually get run over. That's my particular opinion. So last year, not this last session, but the session before, obviously Governor Inslee is very concerned about climate change in general and the environment, etc. And he had a piece of legislation that wasn't moving very fast, and I sat down with some legislators in the House and we worked over components of that might have made it more palatable, particularly to areas like ours. And we put together a piece of legislation, and it was not introduced this year, but the year before. I can't remember the number, but I don't think it's that hard to find. That would have actually provided timber landowners with $45 a thousand board feet for every log they sent to a Washington mill. And the reason would be is that we would know then that the carbon was sunk. It would go into construction material. So that would be the additionality that the environmentalists were looking for, is that we knew where that product is going. Well, that's real money. That's a lot of money. And that also made some investments in forest health, made some investments in, and it also had an offset, because this carbon pricing is going to affect the price of fuel at the pump, about 3 cents. It also had permanent offsets for log trucks and for people that haul agriculture, so that it would offset that. It also had permanent exemptions for pieces of the wood products industry like pulp mills, etc. Even though they don't sink carbon as well, they're still replacing it with trees that are sinking carbon, after. So we tried to have forestry be seen as part of the solution in general in that, and was able to get, you got to look at the names on the bill. It has Habib and Ranker and Cole Wells and me on the bill with that kind of stuff in the bill in the Senate. I still think that there's going to be an initiative or legislation coming either next year or the year after that will put some price on carbon, focused on oil, coal, etc. And that price will show up at your pump. Now it's going to be about 3 cents, 4 cents was the way it was put together. And Harry, when he was yelling at me about this the last time he talked to me, I said, do you realize that the Republicans just passed a 9-cent gas tax down there? And everybody was like, oh, no big deal. And that all went into concrete in Puget Sound. So 3 to 4 cents, if we can get it set up towards benefiting the timber areas and timber forest management and our natural resource based industry, it looks like a pretty good deal to me. So anyway, so that's kind of the tract I was trying to work on. I still do have some contacts, and I know that there are people that are interested in that. It's been a little bit slow coming from the timber industry side, which has been part of the problem. I'm just going to be frank, we've talked about this before. And I don't know why they're standing back thinking that maybe it's not going to happen. Well, it's going to happen. We can either be part of the solution or not, is my opinion. So, yes, sir.
Once again, thanks for your service and dedication, and since you have the opportunity to be a little candid, I wanted to ask about the McCleary decision. Reading the newspaper, it seems to be that the legislation has done the minimum just to get them off their backs temporarily. The funding is such a large issue. In your opinion, being in the legislation so long, do you think there's going to be a solution in a couple of years? Are we going to be a decade from now still having the court and the legislation play this dance?
So, the legislature, in my experience, has always got it done at the last possible second. Okay? And the last possible second is this upcoming session. Because 2018 was the deadline for McCleary. The legislature has made huge investments in education over the last 4 years, and like I said, wiped all but $400 million of that initial payment for materials, school supplies, transportation, K-3 class size. I remembered what I was going to say now. Metrics. I remember. Class size is a metric, okay? It's a metric in the lower grades. I'll get back to your
Yeah, no,
question.
no, no.
I gotta do this one, you know, it's senior.
And class size is part of the answer?
Yeah, but class size, we have good data, helps in the lower grades. Doesn't make hardly any difference in the upper grades. And yet 1351 mandates it across all grades. Okay, so that's just an interesting sidelight. Now, what were we talking about over here?
With that amount of money, can the legislation, even though they kick it down to the end, still make the midnight deadline on the third session?
The clery obligation was way bigger than what's left, and most of that has been nicked away, okay? So there will need to be some tough decisions about how we deal with the levies, cap them, raise the state property tax levy to balance that out, whether there's some additional tax resources, whether the legislature, when they have a final McCleary solution, decide to alter 1351 in a way that maybe looks at some of the metrics, like class sizes in the upper grades aren't as important. The fact that we don't have enough teachers, even if we just couldn't do it, so some of those things could be phased in over a lot longer period of time. So I think that I believe they're going to get it done. I have not. We've gone right up to shutting government down a couple of times in this state, but we've got it done. And I believe that in this state that there still is the will to do that. We haven't devolved into a federal government situation at all in the state, and so I think people will get it done, and I just won't be there to be in the middle of it this next year.
Jim, before we go on, I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting 15 minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go for it. We're quicker than the legislature.
That was a one-vote aye. Division?
Jim, I have a daughter and a son-in-law who are school teachers in the North Bend, Snoqualmie Valley School District. And they haven't had a raise in 7 years, not a penny. And I can speak with some clarity on this matter with my daughter, who's a graduate of Port Angeles High School, and et cetera, et cetera. It's very disheartening. My daughter Lynn, and those who knew Lynn down from, know her to be an extraordinary teacher, a gifted teacher, actually. I'm a little prejudiced, but it's true. But not having a raise for 7 years, and as hard as she works, and she represents an awful lot of teachers in the state who are in the same boat. For all these decisions about McCrory, or whether it's going to get done at the last second or the last hour, notwithstanding, there needs to be a re-emphasis and a recognition that the most valuable part of the school curriculum is the teacher in front of the students. Is the legislature going to get that?
So, first of all, how long has your daughter been a teacher?
Well, she started at Newport Hills Elementary School in Bellevue as a teacher about 1993.
Okay. So, the teachers that have stepped out have not had any raise from the state. Most school districts, and I'm not sure about North Bend, have used their levy dollars to the contracts that actually give them the salary increases. So in your daughter's case, she may not have literally had a penny increase, but many teachers have not had an increase in salary from the state, but because of steps, they go up, and or because their contract uses levy dollars for tri-days and other things like that, they've still got an increase in salary. So there are some, and I'm not going to argue with you about that, but I'm just saying it's way less than you think because of those other things going on. However, having said that, the money I've got in this light green thing here was to fund 6130, and 6130 put a salary schedule in that would give teachers a raise over the next 6 years as we phased in this switch from levies to the state, and hopefully did it in a way where every teacher in the state would see some increase instead of all the increases happening at Everett, Seattle, and Marysville, where they have these property-rich districts. So that's what that legislation was put together to do, and that's factored into this number. So I certainly agree with you, but it is all over the map, and you've got to look at the entire compensation package meaning the extra tri-days they get out of the levies, meaning, you know, whether they've had step increases, they got more for education, etc. Teachers that have been teachers for quite some time, there are a number of them in property-poor areas that have not had a raise at all. You are correct. And in fact, it's probably worse than that, their health care costs more.
Yeah.
So they've actually been losing. And so that's the inequity all over the state.
Well, Jim, I guess the part that most bothers me, and I know it bothers her a great deal, is when the state, the school system, is losing the opportunity to attract future good teachers because of this issue. It's a core fundamental issue that needs to be resolved.
So
there needs to be equity brought to this.
There absolutely needs to be equity. I totally agree with that. This is an expensive deal. Steve, do you remember how much a 1% raise for teachers is? About $400 million for a 1% raise statewide. I mean, it's, you know, you're talking about large amounts of money. There's lots of teachers, lots of kids. Then, of course, like I said, you have 1351 lowest class sizes, which means you need more classrooms, capital, as well as, you know, more teachers, etc. So it's one of those great big problems that just to move the dial just a little bit costs huge amounts of money. And so, yes, I believe they're going to get it done, and I believe they're going to get it done at phases and raises over a particular period of time, too. I believe that.
But if I might, with that said, what you've just done is the reason I so respect you. And so distinguishes you as a legislator. I think virtually anybody who has gone down to Olympia or has been involved in a business association or whatever association, have always found you to be a person who gets it, who understands it, responds with sincerity and honesty and integrity. And Jim, that's what I most respect about you. Thank you.
I get the last question, because you already had one. In my community, I believe one of the things that's hitting us really, really hard is the Department of Ecology. With we have the dump, garbage dump, I shouldn't just call it the dump. We have the water cleanup, we have Rainier, we have the timber issues. And there always seems to be this Department of Ecology that whether it's the rivers that need help for flood stuff. So how do we approach you all to bring some control, in my opinion, to the Department of Ecology?
Well, so the first thing I'm going to say is most of those issues are because we have issues. You know, we've got a dump falling into the Straits of Juan de Fuca. Okay, so you can't go, oh, it's the Department of Ecology that's making us do something when we literally got the mess, you know, there. We've got other things in the harbor, etc. I know that we all have regulations that have passed. Now, the state has regulations that have passed that we may object to. Okay, there's a political process for that. Legislation can be introduced. Standards can be raised or lowered, you know, through legislation. And so, to the extent people want to bring that forward, the Department of Ecology is taking and trying to enforce the laws that are given to them. They don't make a whole bunch of stuff up. They interpret it, you know, to try to make it work. The current head of the Department of Ecology, Maya Bellin, is the best you could ever hope for. Okay, she is somebody that tries to solve problems instead of somebody that's just a stick in the mud. And I've had this happen with the Cosmo Pulp Mill down in Grace Harbor, where they had problems with affluent and they've had problems with the oyster beds and stuff, and she's working for solutions. I know we've had this happen in many others. Worked with them on the water rule out here. You may not like my position on the water rule, but to try to make it, you know, workable, and continues to try to make it workable. In fact, has gone and met with home builders, you know, to try to make it more workable. She can't, out of whole cloth, change regulations. She can try to provide solutions to make things happen within them. I'm still going to be a senator through the end of December, and so if there's something specific on any of these projects we still need some interface with, I'd be glad to call her, talk with her. I know, Steve, I think you have the same opinion. I mean, of all the directors we've had in the Department of Ecology, she's the most, let's solve the problem instead of just, no, we're just going to stick on this and you can't move. And I know we've had some issues out here with the whole Rainier cleanup and stuff that's been going on way predated her. I don't know how long that's going to take. I'm sorry. So, I don't think you can just blame the department, is what I'm saying. There's a whole, series of laws that allow citizens to sue if the department doesn't do something, so they're walking this fine line, and if they just step back and said, we're not going to enforce it, and you get a citizen lawsuit, you may never get it done. You're stuck forever because it goes into the courts. So, again, I'm being candid.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we have one more question, I think.
Well, here's somebody that hasn't asked them.
How come I'm not gonna fish for salmon this year?
What?
I'm not gonna be able to fish for salmon this year.
Depends on where you go, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, right here, you can't fish for salmon, there's no salmon season because our leaders can't get together and set aside
Oh, we're talking
recreational
about,
salmon
okay,
fishing.
you're
Yeah.
talking about the state and tribal negotiations.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, that really affects our tourism. It really affects me personally. 'Cause I like to catch salmon.
I like to eat salmon.
Yeah.
Not so big on the catching
What is the state doing about it? Do you
Well,
know?
sheesh. We have a co-management system, and where they have to come to some agreement on the harvest levels, and we've had definite impacts on some of the runs because of this warm stuff out, and you're a little off my track here. There's warm stuff out in the ocean, and so we have federal law that requires us to protect those natural runs, and when some of the hatchery runs are mixed in with them, it's kind of hard to sort them out at some point in time. All I can say is that the co-managers haven't been able to agree on which runs to catch and which ones not to. And it's kind of not state level, it's federal law that requires that co-management decision. So I know that the Department of Fisheries and the tribes have been working hard to come to some agreement, and I don't know if that negotiations are back on now, or they're back on, because I think everybody wants to sort it out. Even though your opportunity may be small, I'm hoping we get it sorted out at some point in time. Okay, and I'll just leave these up here, and you guys can do that. I think we exceeded our 15-minute extension.
Your motorcycle goggles and your retirement chair.
We have these neat posters up here with the Death Star here and everything else.
That's a pretty good.
Anyway, all right, see everybody same time next week.